I'm sorry, we weren't, sorry that, folks, if you're online, you're just joining us here. I'm just starting a recap here. We're probably going to go back to public comment since we were muted there, Commissioner.
Okay, we will go back then to public comment. Is there anyone out online that would like to make a public comment this time? See any hand raised?
I don't see any.
Okay, we'll go back to you then, Dave.
Yeah, and so for those online, what I was doing is recapping the situation that we have in our court areas. And so we have a district court over there and our justice court, and that's been a really successful combination for the past 46 years. That building's been over there. And of course, our sheriff's office is downstairs, and then we have our buildings and grounds maintenance shop down there, which we'll talk a little bit about later. So about 18 months ago, 20 months ago, the Nevada Supreme Court ruled and mandated that domestic violence cases would have the option, individuals charged with domestic violence would have the option of a jury trial, which was not the norm. Of course, that led us to look at possibilities of accommodating a 6-person jury as well as a jury room in the current justice court. It was very tight, but we found a way to put it together. And that was good. We were excited that we could move forward. However, about a year later, the Supreme Court came back and changed that 6-member jury requirement to a 12-member jury. That became a huge problem for us, trying to find 6 additional seats plus 2 alternates, so essentially 14 seats, plus a big enough jury room. We just, well, stretched us to the limit, and was going to require that the district court make some changes and give up space so that we could accommodate a few things, some meeting rooms that we badly need due to some new rules after a ruling in Davis versus the state of Nevada, which was about indigent services. And so we have some special needs that are now necessary, and we've just tried to get by for years. So, so we went back to the drawing board, and in a minute, I'm going to have Judge Mike Montero come up and explain, well, he and Judge Lovelace come up and tell us a little bit about the discussion that they had when they looked at the new drawings with the 14 seats and a smaller jury room, and concerns that they had with that. The goal, from my perspective, is we were going to spend a great deal of money to do that, because in order to do it, we were going to have to temporarily house both courts in temporary housing, which after we looked at that, that was over $2 million to do that. And of course, once we're done with them, they go away. So $2.4 million would be just wasted in a sense. We'd have nothing to show for it. So at that point in time, the judges kind of met and thought, wow, this is potentially a problem, especially long term. So I guess at that point, we went back to the drawing board and said, okay, well, let's look at the other option, which actually was Plan B as far as our original master plan back in 2018 that we put together. And so that was to do a standalone justice center with just actually building a whole new facility. And at that time, the county commission was not willing to consider that. And of course, that was prior to the Supreme Court ruling. But in any case, so at this time, I think what I'd like to do, Mr. Chair, is have the judges come up and just provide us a little background on their concerns with renovating with the 14-member jury situation, and just kind of share with you their concerns of going that direction.
Absolutely. Who's going first?
I'll talk because I have a hearing coming up shortly. So for the record, Michael Montero, thank you, Chairman Tipton, and members of the commission, and Mr. Mendiola for giving that overview. I'm going to maybe add a few pieces to the history from my recollection, and maybe Judge Lovelace can help correct me some, to uh, there was somewhere in the last many months when we saw I think some of the drawings and the idea of moving temporarily into, modular space across the street while the remodel was occurring up here in the courtrooms, that Judge Lovelace and I ran into each other in the parking lot one afternoon, or maybe in the hallway, and I think it was Judge Lovelace said, "Hey, what would you think if maybe we had this, if we moved in that modular space, that maybe Justice Court just stay there, and then that would afford District Court to expand in that second floor as it currently exists." And my recollection was, I said, well, I don't know. Why don't we share that with somebody? And I think it was shortly after that I had a brief discussion with Mr. Mendiola about that. And then that seems like when everything kind of blossomed from there. We had some special meetings and talked about the cost, which has just blown my mind as to what some of these numbers are since this kind of project started. And let me go back on that too. I mean, when we were talking about whether it be renovating the space that we currently have to accommodate jury trials and justice court, or resolving some ADA issues in the district court, or allowing for some extra space. I had agreed and with conversations with Mr. Mendiola and then presented at budget hearings to use $3 million from the district court's ending fund balance. And I was really hopeful at that time that those funds could go a long ways to solving our problems here. And then the next thing I hear is it's, $6 million, $15 million. There's no ending fund balance that I have. So I'm out of this discussion with regards to the funds right now, because I don't know where this is going to come from, and I don't have a good answer for that, and I don't envy you all if you want to move forward with this as to where that's going to come from. In that regard, though, I was tasked with speaking to then Chief Justice James Hardesty at the Nevada Supreme Court about the funds from the state, I want to say CARES Act, but it was ARPA, the American Relief Fund Act, because there was a mention apparently at a NACO meeting in a conversation between Commissioner French and Justice Hardesty. So I followed up on that. And Justice Hardesty, Chief Justice Hardesty at the time, told me, whoa, there's not millions of dollars. There might be hundreds of thousands of dollars that might be available from that fund. And then he says, you need to go back and start talking about other sources for the type of construction you're talking about. And so I did follow up on that. I was saddened to hear that there wasn't the ability to receive some of these funds from the state. So I'm going to move forward again to some of our more recent conversations when we've met in a subcommittee about a couple of things. We started with these plans for the second floor where the Justice and District Court are now. And in order to accommodate I think it was both the Justice Court's jury needs, and then due to COVID, us not wanting to reduce the footprint of the large courtroom, there was a suggestion to take up some of the district court office space for attorney-client meeting rooms. I said, no, I can't sacrifice the room I presently have. I can live with the room I have, but I can't sacrifice more of that. We too need to have some room to spread people out, and hopefully be able to accommodate the entire jury trial process back in this building again sometime. So I was kind of unwavering on that. And so then our subcommittee meetings, we started talking about, well, hey, maybe it's time we start looking again at the idea of a standalone justice center again. And I've enjoyed those conversations because it sounds wonderful. I don't, I'm not going to dismiss that. I mean, it sounds great to have, the room for everything we need. But what I think sounds wonderful and maybe would be nice to have, I do understand we need to plan for that. And I don't know that that for the district court, I don't know that we couldn't make do with what we have with some modifications in the short term. But I do think the commission, the county, uh, the courts maybe need to be looking ahead to the future and plan for something. I just don't know how quickly that could happen, and that's a decision you all have to have, discussions you have to have, and decision you have to make, and that's just purely because it's a much larger price tag than I had ever envisioned. Now, let me also distinguish between justice court and district court. This Supreme Court decision that gets a lot of talk, that did not affect district court. That was affecting justice court. And so we've had jury trials and, for probably ever. So this, and justice court had them at one time. It's now a kind of a, they've been reinvented, I guess. And then, although the Nevada Supreme Court issued a decision that said, okay, you have to provide jury trials in domestic violence cases, the legislature, and I'm going to let Mr. McDonald speak to this after I leave because he's going to probably know those changes, or Judge Lovelace, better than I. But then the legislature came in and said, whoa, wait a minute. Now that jury has to be bigger than originally 6, I think, and expanded to 12. But I think that law change also allows for some other things in domestic violence cases that I don't want to really speak to. That does not affect district court. So if I'm looking at district court alone, here are the issues that I see. We took out our jury box in the large courtroom during COVID because that jury box was not conducive to seating a jury where you had to social distance. There were 16 seats in there. It's that stadium seating. So you're literally shoulder to shoulder with the person next to you. And when you have at a minimum a 13-person jury with only 3 empty seats, there was no ability to separate people, even by literally a foot. So in order to accommodate social distancing for lawyers and parties, we took the jury box out. I still stand by that decision. I think it was the best thing we did during COVID to expand the well of the courtroom so we could move attorneys and clients and court staff far enough apart that we could open our courtroom and still have court. That's was a temporary fix to accommodate during COVID, but we do need to have a jury box back. We have to have a jury box, and it's going to put it on these architects and others that are much smarter than I to figure out how can we put a jury box back in there that does allow sufficient accommodations for handicapped and some spacing. I don't know what the rules are going to be in the future as to how much room we have to have between you and I mean, we're kind of shoulder to shoulder right now, but I don't know what the future holds. But the problem with those stadium seats, because as I just learned, this building's 46 years old. And when I came 13 years ago, I know the carpet hadn't been changed in, in those 40 plus years. So there have been really very few upgrades to that courtroom over 46 years. And these stadium seats, were probably built at a time when it didn't really accommodate, human nature. I mean, we have bigger people who come for jury duty and can't fit in those they're like this. There's a fixed armrest. I mean, and I've had people that have had to kind of sit at the edge of the seat during a jury trial in order to even fit into those seats. And that is extremely awkward for me as a judge to be 2 or 3 days watching someone struggle and no ability. Just Tuesday, this week, I've been having the 5th graders come and visit the courtroom again. Haven't been able to do that for 2 years, but we agreed to do it this year. On Tuesday, I had a couple of classes from the French Ford Middle School special education, and we had at least one child in a wheelchair. And I'll tell you, I get really nervous because I really don't have a place in that courtroom to accommodate a wheelchair. And we often have, and Mr. McDonald has been personally present for this when we have people in adult guardianship cases who come to the court and who are wheelchair bound and can't get up to counsel table because just not enough room. I mean, I know my chainsaw could probably fix that problem, but I catch a little grief over that when I start talking that way. But there's not room to maneuver a wheelchair up to counsel table. So there are some real problems in district court. We have a jury room where during a jury trial, the jury retires, both for their deliberations and on recesses, and that room is tight. Pre-COVID, never worried about it. Everybody was happy there. It has restrooms, it has a big table, it has nice comfy chairs. Since COVID, we've not been able to use that room for jury trials. I've not felt comfortable putting 12 to 13 people in there for any length of time, and want to be responsible for that. Jury selection, we're still using the convention center for jury selection, and last jury trial we used the Boys and Girls Club. Because when we summons 65, 70, 80 people for a jury trial, there's really limited room in the courtroom for that. So those are the real problems today, some of which didn't exist 2 years ago, none of which are the result of any change in the law or Supreme Court order for me, for district court. So that's a little the history and kind of what I see are some of the needs of the district court. I hope I haven't misrepresented any of my recollection of the history of conversations. And I appreciate you all giving this your time and attention today. Questions? I'd be happy to answer questions.
Questions? Commissioner Hill?
I don't have any questions, no.
Commissioner Hill, if you don't mind me maybe asking, because you were, we participated together in some of those subcommittee meetings on this building issue. Did I miss anything significant there that you recall?
No, I don't think so. There was something with the access to the access, reverse access out the back.
Oh, yeah, but that too has been in some of the earlier plans. And I think that was discussions we were having pre-COVID even, is just for security purposes. When you're in the back of behind the courtrooms or even in the courtrooms, there's no ability to escape in the event of, something bad, active shooter or fire. You have to come out through the courtrooms to get out of the building, which there was and always has been, I think, some plans for some type of ingress, egress out the back.
I just remember that added significantly to that cost of that project.
Yeah.
So,
Commissioner Haas? Question?
Not at this time.
Thank you.
Commissioner Cherry?
Yeah, thank you. I think I'm getting a feedback here, excuse me. I just want to make sure that I've got it clearly from Judge Montero, where he's coming from right now. So bear with me. Sounds like that you have some needs in your courtroom that do need to be addressed, but you're satisfied with what of the courtroom that you have right now, just some renovation and some additional adjustments in that court. and that could satisfy your needs, you for this. Is that right? You're not looking for a new courthouse.
Well, Commissioner Cherry, thank you. And I don't mean to be flippant about this, but satisfied is that's a tough one. I will agree with you that there are some needs in the district court. So can the district court continue to operate in the space it presently has on a temporary or whatever we want to define temporary? Yes, I can. We can make this work. I believe we can make this work. Now, when I say we can make this work, I'm not the architects who have to draw this and find, the space for juries and jury boxes and things. But as far as me personally, I don't have any requirements of the law other than maybe ADA that are absolutely driving this discussion. Satisfied? Well, of course, I'd like to have a jury box back, and I'd like to have the ability to do jury trials in my courtroom. But I do think that there could be some workable solutions to that. And really, I was really excited about. That's why I think I was really excited when Judge Lovelace and I had that conversation about, maybe justice court having a different space. But I understand too the reality of that was extremely expensive and probably very temporary. So I don't know that I'm giving you as direct an answer as you want. And I think driving my decision here today, or my comments today, is my issues are not $15 million issues. So those are kind of decisions you guys have to make, not me. Do I have some things that we need? Yes, I do.
Yeah, that is what I think you've answered my question. Thank you.
Commissioner Hill.
Okay, yeah, this is Commissioner Hill. I have one more question for you, Judge Montero. In the preliminary drawings that we had discussed in our subgroups, were you satisfied with any of those preliminary drawings from your side? I know we had some
Yeah.
The other Justin.
I'd have to look at them,
Okay.
Commissioner Hill, because when we talk about preliminary hearings, we're going back to some drawings that were 18, 20 months ago.
Sure.
So I guess it would depend on which version of those drawings we're referring back to. When I say I'd be satisfied, would be not sacrificing any of the current footprint of the district court space. Now, if you wanted to gut the whole thing and start over, maybe we move the courtroom to the right side of the building or the left side of the building. I'm okay with that, but I just don't see how we can operate in the fashion that we're operating and provide for any room for growth if we reduce the footprint of district court and district court office space.
Okay.
It just historically here too, and you maybe don't want to hear this. I mean, we have over the years, I was looking last night at some of the kind of internal renovations we've made in the district court area. And I think we've been through at least 3 different fairly significant, office reconfigurations in the last probably 8 years to, try to accommodate some of the growth that we've already seen. And so it's, we haven't sat idly by and just wait for things to fall in our lap. And we've done some things to try to, poor buildings and grounds, they have law library books stuffed in probably every nook and cranny in this building.
Yeah.
So that we could make some space for offices, especially during COVID when we needed to spread employees out so that we could open up.
And the reason I bring that up is, when we started this project, we had CTA redraw this 3 or 4 times, I believe. And I think we all came to the consensus that we've got a certain amount of square footage, and no matter how many times we rearrange it, we've just never came to a conclusion that's going to satisfy all the needs. So I wanted to make sure that that was out there.
And Commissioner Hill, I completely agree with that. Every meeting I've been in,
Yeah.
every meeting I've been in this, on this topic, we kind of come back to the same thing.
Yeah.
You know, how do we configure this?
Yeah.
To accommodate, you know, some of these needs, but I just want to make it clear that not all of these needs are my needs.
Sure. Yep.
Okay.
Yep. No, and that's a good point, bringing that out, that we've got two different areas that we're looking at trying to fulfill the needs for. And it's good to hear your side that immediately you can get by, but something needs to be.
I think that one thing that, again, Mike Montero for the record, that I've come away from through these discussions is that, and, you know, Mr. Mendiola is I think been really good about, you know, helping me understand, is we just need to sometimes step back and reevaluate.
Yep.
Because we get focused on one solution and then we run into these problems. So I appreciate this meeting because to me, it looks like it gives us the ability to kind of step back, look at this, plan longer term. And I look forward to the outcome, whatever it may be.
I completely agree with that. I think it's good that we meet and put all options on the table and make a decision moving forward.
And I'm going to have to step out for a hearing that I have, but I have some of my staff here that can maybe stay and listen and then maybe come get me if and pull me out of court if needed, because I don't want the perception that I'm abandoning the discussion. I'm not. I appreciate you having this. So unless there's any other questions at this time.
I don't have any more.
Thank you, Judge Montero.
Okay, thank you.
Before you go, Commissioner French is not online either.
He is not.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Judge.
Good morning, Commissioners. Jim Lovelace, Justice of the Peace. As it's already been stated, I too appreciate this meeting that we're having today to discuss this issue. This is an issue that needs to be kind of roundtabled and come up with a decision on how to move forward. It's already been discussed how Justice Court, and it sounds like if Justice Court is a small space, legislation has, and it's already been spoken about, has now mandated justice courts to hold jury trials for domestic violence cases. Okay, those jury trials, as of January 1st of this year, it did require prior to that a 6-person jury with 1 alternate. Now it's requiring 12-person jurors with 1 or 2 alternates. The original plans, I shouldn't say the original plans, there was various plans that's already been mentioned as the drawings, possible drawings as it relates to the different courts. The latest, I should say, the last set of drawings, we kind of sat down, reviewed them, and my point of view was looking at the growth that Humboldt County is doing, possibly even more court staff at a later time. Those particular drawings did not allow for any growth for justice court. And in other words, it just looked like we were spending a whole lot of money just to move furniture around, is what my point of view was. I had the discussion with Judge Montero, and my feeling was and again, I'm not the numbers person, I don't know. My feeling was to move justice court out of the 2nd floor, let district court take over the entire area there, and put justice court in modular setups, whatever the case may be, more of a permanent, and it would allow for the growth and just keep justice court there. But I understand, you know, that it's expensive. You know, we're talking numbers and everything is expensive. And that was my feelings. That's why I had the discussion with Judge Montero. And that was my belief. And I'm going to just say it now. I still believe that way. I believe it could be done. But I'm not here. I'm not the planner or anything like that. I'm just throwing out my thoughts on it, because the current justice court right now we can only have bench trials in it. I've got there's 16 portable seats in the courtroom for the public to sit in. Right now, currently, when I have had a jury trial, but we had to use a convention center to, again, 60 people, get 60 people assembled, sit a jury. And then, as you recall, on one of the commissioner meetings, I've asked your permission to use this room, the commissioner's room here, to hold the actual jury trial. And of course, you allowed me to do that. So everything for justice court right now is very temporary. So we're trying to come up with solutions for something that we have to take care of today and kind of move forward on a temporary basis. So that's where we're kind of sitting with justice court on that. So I'll answer any questions you may have. I think a lot of things have already been discussed. But right now, the current justice court is the way we're mandated. And I got a feeling eventually we're also going to be mandated. Mr. McDonald might be able to help me out with this, but we also might be mandated to do jury trials for DUI cases. So I see that in the future, but currently right now, no. So I'll be more than happy to answer any questions.
Commissioner Hill?
Yes, Commissioner Hill, I have the same question for you, Judge Levis. In any of the preliminary drawings, did you see anything that would fit your immediate needs? I know you talked about no room for growth, but were any of those concepts satisfactory to complete your immediate needs?
It would be the same, pretty much the same comments as Judge Montero said. The last set of drawings, it showed a let's say a jury box.
Yep.
Putting 13, 14 seats in there. Again, we're talking the COVID issues, and I too in justice court had the same type of chairs. I removed those chairs because nobody could fit in them anymore. People were getting stuck in those chairs. So I went and put movable chairs, and I don't see anything currently in the set of drawings that we have current. I don't see, again, I just believe it's just moving furniture around. I don't think it's going to work. It doesn't allow for not just personnel space growth, but storage. It doesn't allow for any storage. And we have a storage problem right now, currently.
I have one more question. This Commissioner Hill again. So I don't know the legalities or whatever of sharing that big courtroom, but is that an opportunity for us to share that big courtroom, or is there just so much court traffic that we need two big courtrooms or two larger courtrooms?
Okay, again, Jim Lovelace, Justice of the Peace. Judge Montero and I have spoken about that. He has allowed me to use the large courtroom when the large courtroom is available. But we're finding problems. He's having jury trials at the same time I'm scheduled to have a jury trial. So we've actually had to cancel some of our jury trials because of that. But that is an option. We just have not used it yet. It's not been available.
Yeah, and again, I don't know the timeframes and the legalities of timeframes for court cases, but is that something where proper planning, we could plan out and try to accommodate more often than not? Again, I don't know the legalities of all that, and I know you guys have timelines that you have to hit.
We have actually tried that to look at calendars on, both courts run different calendars. District court has certain requirements that they have to do. Justice court has certain requirements that they have to do. And right now they're just not meeting. And I think a lot of this is both courts, from my view, have gotten extremely busy since I don't want to say the end of the COVID, but things now are starting to flow through the courtrooms pretty heavily. A lot of cases. In fact, I've got a full calendar today on that. I'm not sure if that answered your question.
Yeah, no, just questions that I have, just trying to wrap my head around, trying to utilize the space as effectively as we can and save money.
Right. No, I understand. Absolutely. Absolutely.
District Attorney McDonald, you had something you wanted to add?
Yeah, I do have some comments, but again, Mike McDonald, District Attorney for the record, as it relates to the sharing of courtrooms, I do not see that occurring today or in the future at all, really. And that's because district court is using the big courtroom just about every day of the week. District court or justice court is using its courtroom just about every day of the week. We also are running child support hearings a week. Usually it's 1 week every month. We run child support hearings through the small district courtroom. We are also running juvenile court hearings through the small district courtroom or the large district courtroom, depending on what's available every week. And then we also have senior judges coming in fairly regularly to hear civil or criminal matters, and they are using either the district courtroom, the large one, or the small district courtroom. So right now, I mean, I've named, you know, justice court, district court, juvenile court. It's not unusual for us to be running four courts in 3 courtrooms in the average week. So we've maximized our facilities from that standpoint.
Thank you.
Thank you for that.
Commissioner Cherry, do you have questions?
Yeah. Judge Lovelace, these, the mandate says that we have to provide space or a courtroom for jury trials. And those trials are those jury trials, do I understand it right? They are only if the defendant requests a jury trial. It's not mandated that they all be jury trials, correct?
Jim Lovelace, Justice of the Peace. Yeah, that is correct, Commissioner Cherry. Right now, and I want to make sure that I kind of mention this as well. The defendant, once somebody is arrested on domestic violence charge, they have 30 days within that time period to request a jury trial with justice court. Currently, everybody has done that, whether it's through themselves requesting that or through an attorney requesting that. Currently, right now, justice court has approximately, I shouldn't say approximately, I'm kind of guessing at this based on my last figures. We have approximately about 32 requests for jury trials. We have approximately 15 right now that are not calendared because everything we have calendared right now runs to the end of 2023. So the next calendaring, we're looking at 2024. So we're getting backlogged on it, and we're trying our best to kind of proceed forward. So I'm hoping that answers your question.
Yeah, it is. And it answered the second question, and that is, if you did, how many were on your calendar presently? Now, some of those probably will be settled and won't ever end up in a trial, correct?
That is true. You know, the court is not involved in that. That's a decision with the district attorney's office and or attorneys that are involved in the case or the defendants actually. So that the court is not involved in that.
When I looked at the drawings, it looked like that the justice court was basically going to be as big as the district court, and if we were to go forward with a new facility. And I mean, that's quite a grand growth compared to where you are today. It just seemed like overkill. I mean, the mandate was that we provide for a court for justice, for jury trials in justice court. And it just seems like that we are not just doing that. We've gone far above, and with this new building that's being contemplated, that it's gotten a lot grander than what the mandate is about. And that's just a court, that's all I have.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Haas?
This is Commissioner Haas. Could you explain to me what the law library is used for?
That, Jim Lovelace, Justice of the Peace. I'm not really involved in the law library, but I know it's for the public to come in and do research. Anybody that wants to do research, that's what my understanding is the purpose behind that.
So that wouldn't be a terrible loss on that floor if we moved it.
Well, again, I don't want to comment to that. Justice Court's
who would
not
I
even
talk to
involved in
about
that.
it?
Pardon me?
Who would I talk to about
It'd
it?
be Judge Montero.
Okay, thank you.
And that law library is housed in Justice Court now, or no, in district.
It's housed in district court.
Mr. McDonald, would you go through the process? I want to make sure I know the legal process of someone that is arrested for domestic violence, how that process moves forward through your office and would end up into Justice Court.
Sure. So first, just the process in general. On felony or gross misdemeanor arrests, those cases, when once charged, they appear in Justice Court for preliminary hearings. The probable cause hearing, if the court finds that a crime, it appears a crime was committed and the defendant committed it, then those cases transfer to district court. District court is where folks plead guilty or not guilty and have a jury trial on gross misdemeanor and felony cases. On misdemeanor trials, the Justice Court is the court that handles trials. And up until 2 years ago, or 2.5 years ago, all misdemeanor trials in Justice Court were just bench trials, were heard by the judge. Now, I think back in the 80s, there was a time where there were some DUI jury trials in the state, but for the most part, most of the last several decades, there have been no jury trials in Justice Court. The process really is no different. The only whether there's a jury trial or not, if someone pleads not guilty, for us to put on a trial, we just have a jury that sits and hears the evidence, listens to the law, applies the law to the facts that were presented, and makes a decision. And that process is completed instead of the judge making that decision. The judge still presides, makes determinations on admissibility of evidence or the appropriateness of questions and those types of things, but it's the trier of fact, or the true decision maker on the trial is the jury. But that's the difference now. The law, the Supreme Court found that domestic batteries were serious offenses because it affected one's rights or eliminated the right to bear arms for individuals convicted. And because of that, felt it was a serious offense and one that needed a jury to make the determination and not just rely on our Justice Court judges or Justice of the Peace or municipal court judges. There were questions out there that were answered with this new legislation as well, where if someone has already lost their rights to bear arms, whether a jury trial would be needed. Somebody had a prior felony, or maybe they had a prior domestic battery that prohibited them from having a firearm. The new law that went into effect January 1 says, regardless of whether their rights to bear arms has already been affected by it based on a prior conviction, they are entitled to a jury trial in Justice Court. The law does allow, the law did increase jury trials in justice court from 6 to 12. However, it does allow that prior to jury selection, the prosecutor and defense attorney or defendant through the defense attorney may agree to a jury size smaller than 12, but no less than 6. I do not see any defense attorney agreeing to less than 12. And I say that because that defense attorney really is trying to get one person to find not guilty out of the jury, and that reduces the number of folks that you would have to try and convince by cutting it from 12 to 6. So I think that most defense attorneys say, I like my chances with 12 better than 6. Every case that I'm aware of that's been charged and someone's here in the last couple of years has asked for a jury trial on domestic batteries. And I don't see that changing either. If those cases are going to go to trial, they'll be by jury. So.
Any other questions?
I got a general question. I don't know if this is the time to ask it or not. Essie or someone that was involved in the looking at what we have and making renovations or adjusting that, but was the buildings and grounds portion of that courtroom, the basement or the lower floor or wherever the buildings and grounds shop is, we're going to be talking about buildings and grounds in another facility there where they'll be moving out. What we need is just another courtroom. That's what we're mandated, is to have another courtroom for jury trials. Is there enough room there? Could that be done?
Mr. Chair.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a question as well.
Yeah.
Commissioner Cherry, so.
Yeah. So Dave Mendiola, County Manager, that's part of the reason I put both of these on the agenda today, so that we could kind of flesh some things out. When we did the master plan in 2018, we looked at several options, and that space down there was part of the discussion that said, if we move buildings and grounds out, could we do something down there? I don't recall if we, and Angela Hansen's on the phone, she may recall better than I, whether we talked specifically about putting a courtroom down there, but we did talk about putting like those meeting rooms that Judge Montero referred to for attorney clients down there. We talked about a couple different options like that. Angela, do you recall if we specifically talked about either moving justice court down there or just putting a courtroom or two down there? Do you recall that?
I do, and we did take a look at that when we did the master plan. It seems to me, I'd have to go back and look at our notes from that, but I believe that we ended up determining that as far as a courtroom, we couldn't get it because, I know this is gonna sound weird, but the floor to ceiling height issue, once you put a bench in there and the height of the bench versus the actual floor for the jury box and that sort of thing. So we couldn't get that clearance, but we could use it for meeting rooms or additional storage if we needed it, or things like that.
That's my recollection as well.
Yeah, this Commissioner Hill, I recall in some of our meetings that, and we tossed around a lot of ideas of moving some of the non-essential court duties there. And I think it was very unfavorable that we break that whole area up in that manner. So I do remember that trying to put the whole package together on the floor wasn't going to work, but trying to move individual offices would probably work. But I know it wasn't favorable by the judges to break up their staff that far away from the courtroom.
Right.
And I think it would have involved having the whole sheriff's department dismantled at that time to try to make everything work. And
Right.
it was becoming very involved. Just tossing out ideas. I just
Yeah.
remember it all kind of coming together. So to answer your question, Ron, it was considered, but we did not come up with a good solution at that time. You know, not that there's not still ideas out there.
And Mr. Chair, Dave Mendiola, County Manager again. This is probably a good time to inject the discussion about if we were to move the courts out of that building and into their own building, what would we do with that space? Because one of the things that I believe, and some of the commissioners have been pretty adamant about, we've got to fix the HVAC system over there. It's very, very old and it needs to be dealt with. But so again, if you're looking at the big picture, because right now we're pretty much focused on the courtrooms and taking care of those issues. But if you expand that view, that I think to me, it helps you make some decisions, because right now the district attorney is bulging out of his hardtalk building. I mean, they have no room. We have put some effort into getting a new roof and some renovations in the basement where it was flooding. It's been an ongoing problem and they've just completely run out of space. In addition, the child support services building right behind it has a floor that looks more like a roller coaster. I mean, literally the gals roll up and down hills. It's not a great place right now to have housing anybody. So here's just a thought. I'm just going to throw it out there as we consider with the big picture, is that if we were to build a standalone, then what we could do is look at renovating that space for, let's just say, the district attorney, for sake of argument, as well as the child services, child support, and put them over there. And it's big enough with those two courtrooms that we could probably add some additional offices and accommodate, for example, public defender, alternate public defender, and put more of the legal pieces together. So, and the bottom line with this, and we're going to get to this because I think you need to be aware of this as well, is that no matter what we do, we're probably going to have to bond this. We're going to have to go and take out a loan, essentially. Gina and I have spent a lot of time working on this, and there's just no other answer. We just don't have enough cash available to do it all with what we have internally. So to my thought is that if we're going to make that decision, it's got to be for the next 40, 50 years, not just a kind of a fix it for the next 3 to 5, maybe 10 years, because we're going to be right back at it here. And so that's why I wanted to introduce that concept. And one of the things that's nice, what Angela will go through here in a few minutes, is kind of the pricing and the different options that we looked at, where we started. And we had that interim option that Judge Lovelace mentioned about putting a modular over there and being more permanent modular. And then the last one would be a standalone. But again, I think that should we end up going one of those two ways, we still are going to have to renovate over here for Judge Montero, for whether the district courts by themselves or if they're all together in one standalone building. We still need to utilize. That's a great building. It's got great bones. It's going to be there for probably another 100 years, and we're going to be using it. And again, we're bulging out of our space that we currently have anyway, so that would help us solve problems. But anyway, just want to throw that out there.
Commissioner, I'm just going to interrupt. Do you need me anymore? I've got court as well, but I will be available.
I think we covered. We're probably going to have questions, but you got a job to do too.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, but I will be available.
All right, thank you, Mr.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Jim.
When you were going through these processes, looking at the space available, what you might be able to do with it, did you also consider building a new building for the sheriff's office and using that space in a redesign?
So, Mr. Chair, Dave Mendiola again. So that has come up in the past when we did the master plan. We looked at that. One of the options was to build a sheriff's administrative building next to the current detention facility, which would then, of course, open up that space down there. The biggest challenge on that one is that because that was a jail at one time, it is concrete and reinforced steel, and the cost to just take that out so you could renovate was massive, and that was years ago. So I don't know what the number would be together today. Now, we can do some renovations on it to put some more offices in there, but we couldn't really do the things that we'd like to do because of that cost. You'd have to spend, I don't know, 3, 4, 5 million just to get that concrete and reinforced steel out of there and start over again. So that was a big challenge, and it did come up in discussions at that time. So.
Okay.
So at this time, I think probably a good way to go would be, let's turn it over to Angela Hansen with Cushing Terrell Architects. And you've got some stuff in front of you. Those folks out in the audience, I've got a couple extras here. I'll get those to you, and we can kind of go through sort of while we're going through the different options that we've looked at. We'll give a historical perspective, and then they'll get you some pricing. And then after that, we can possibly, Gina and I can talk a little bit about the cost and funding issues.
Okay, Angela, the floor is yours.
All right, I'm gonna share my screen so that you can see a video. Are you able to see that slide?
We see Ron.
Not yet.
Okay.
I don't know if it may require Mr. Mendiola to do something on his computer.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. How about that?
There you go.
Okay. All right. For the record, Angela Hansen with CTA Architects Engineers out of Boise. Much of this information, you've heard pieces and parts of it. Up on the screen in front of you is a timeline that illustrates for you kind of the process that we've been engaging with the county on over the last several years. We've mentioned the master plan several times. We completed that back in 2018, but really want to focus on the more recent events, really starting back in 2021, in November of 2021, and going forward. So we're going to spend a few minutes kind of recapping and talking about the things that that we've been engaged in over the last several months. And some of this may be repetitive. You've heard it in various narratives previously, but we'll touch on it here a little more in depth. So you're probably wondering why I would show you a marked up drawing like this, but the point of this drawing is that the floor plan that you see there, minus the red comments and red marks, is the floor plan that was determined back in 2018 and 19 when we began working with Justice and District Court as to the scope of the remodel and refresh for the second floor. And this is where we left it when we finished the concepts at the end of 2019 and early 2020. And we had provided an estimate for this amount of work. So we were refreshing the district court, rearranging and adding some jury seats to it, redoing some of the judge's bench and the witness stand, adding some seats for the visitors and the members observing the trials and such, and then adding some attorney-client areas and attorney-client offices at the back of that courtroom space. We were also addressing at that time the need for some ADA restrooms and some accessible restrooms, and so we had figured out a way to relocate a janitor's closet on the floor and turn that janitor's closet into an accessible restroom. At that point, we were still dealing with a 6-person jury trial space in justice court. And so we had reconfigured the justice court room to be able to accommodate those 6-person jury box, reconfigured the clerk and the witness stand and the judge's bench, identified a way to get viewing into the courtroom and accommodate the ADA accessibility. We're also able to, within the justice court space, be able to fit in a 6-person jury deliberation room, their own restroom, and again, making that all accessible. So that's where we walked away from it at the end of 2019. We provided an estimated cost for reconstruction at that point that roughly totaled about $2 million. We then of course, you all know, and we're a part of the events of 2020 and 2021 as the pandemic hit and COVID and things sort of got turned on their head. When we came back then in November of 2021 to this project, we brought this plan with us and started our facility assessment, knowing that this is where we had left off and we were moving forward from this 2019 plan. So we still had the issues that you see listed on the left. We still had the accessibility issues. We knew that there were space constraints, but we were not aware of the amount of space constraints that we were facing based then on kind of that social distancing and COVID level of comfort. The other thing that got thrown into the mix then in November of 21 for us was knowing that we had to do some remodeling in these spaces, the level of the deferred maintenance on the mechanical side of things. And so at that point in November, we went through the building, all floors, the basement, first floor and second floor, and did a thorough review and analysis with our mechanical team just to understand that level of deferred maintenance and what it would do an impact as we began this remodeling process. At that same time that we were investigating the mechanical and electrical systems, we were also confirming the program. And so the red comments and things that you see up there on this drawing are those changes that were identified as part of that program verification. So knowing that it had sat for 2 years, it was just us doing that due diligence of, okay, where are the changes and what are the updates that need to happen to this plan? So you've seen this image before. We took that information that we gathered in November and we brought it back and started modeling the various floor plates within the existing building to illustrate where the changes and disruptions would be occurring. And if you recall, again, from the previous slide, if you remember that blue area just included in the original remodel, the district courtroom and justice court with a small touching of the janitorial closet and making it into a restroom. Based on the information that we received in 21 and the deferred maintenance that we looked at, we saw that the scope was increasing in terms of what we were going to need to touch in the rooms that were going to be affected as we addressed both the mechanical system deficiencies as well as then the space deficiencies that we were hearing. And so you can see by the color coding how those areas have grown. So this is the second floor, illustrating that the scope has increased. Knowing that we're touching more of the area on the second floor, that also impacted for us then the first floor, because much of your mechanical and plumbing systems are fed from the floor below. We had to start looking at then and how we were modifying and going to need to touch some of the areas in the first floor. And so you can see on this diagram how that those mechanical and plumbing changes start impacting the building in a much larger scale. And then that also took us into the basement likewise, so that we have a few changes that are then required from a mechanical and plumbing upgrade in the basement. So there's that additional scope that we had to consider. With that being said, we brought that information back earlier to the commission during the retreat, and indicated to you all that our $2 million estimate was not realistic at this point, given the scope increase and then the economic conditions of construction and the price increases that we were seeing. We informed the commission that at this point you needed to start looking at it as more like a $6 million renovation project. And we moved forward from there. So we began thinking about how the construction would be put together for this renovation and what that would mean to the county and the court systems in particular. And through conversation with our steering committee and the county, determined that the best solution for this would be to temporarily relocate all of the court system out of the second floor and turn that entire floor over to the contractor for construction. And so what that would mean would be temporarily housing them. And so we began the research of identifying what was the availability for temporary facilities and how much would that cost for the county. And so up here on the screen, you can see that if you're going to temporarily house the court system off-site. In this case, we were looking at trailers to be put in the parking lot that was south of 5th Street. That you'd rent those for approximately 19 months. There'd be some fees for setting them up and tearing them down. And there'd have to be some improvements, because when you rent those types of trailers, those are construction trailers and they're construction grade, and they're not set up for holding any sort of courts. They don't really have office space in them or anything like that. So at the end of the day, you'd be sinking $2.2 million just in moving those facilities, those temporary facilities on site, getting them prepared, and then setting them and making them available for folks to move into. We estimated that it would cost the county approximately $10,000 to relocate staff and equipment and things into the space. So you'd be looking at roughly 2.2 or almost $2.3 million for temporary facilities. So those facilities truly are temporary. They don't, you don't get a return on the investment for those, for that $2.3 million. It's what we call or consider a sunk cost. So at the end of the day, when everything's all said and done for the second floor renovation of the existing courthouse, you'd be looking at $8.6 million. We brought this information back to our steering committee and reviewed it with them, and we were asked at that point to also take a look at some space changes, and knowing that we're now moving from a 6-person jury, and we need to account for a 14-person jury in justice court. So again, on the slide and on the screen in front of you, you have the original, the 2019 plan where we left off, and then needing to come back and alter justice court to account for the modifications and the increased needs and numbers for the jury. We looked at this in a variety of ways, and knowing that we're constrained by 4 walls. Really, this plan that you see in front of you on the right-hand side of the screen is where this landed. We knew that in order to accommodate the jury box in Justice Court, we needed to take the space from somewhere. And so we took it from the kind of public entry and hallway and pushed into the hallway. In doing that, that creates a little bit of an issue, knowing that you've got a security and a secure entry point from the foyer into the court wing of the building. And so that was of a little bit of concern to the stakeholders. The other part of this, as we reconfigured things, the description by Judge Montero and the need to space things out and move things around in the district courtroom to give more space to folks meant that we were looking for a place to relocate attorney-client meeting rooms. So if you remember, they were at the back of East Courtroom, and now we were being asked to relocate those. We landed in this scenario by looking at the 2 new staff offices that he had built and saying, okay, what if we were to relocate a wall and move a door? We could gain access to those and make those attorney-client meeting rooms. And so it does cut into his space, and it, as you've heard from his testimony this morning, it creates some concern for him in that he's losing space in this layout. So we did bring this back to them, and you've heard from them this morning is that this was a non-starter for them, so to speak, that it didn't accomplish for them what they desired. So we went back to the drawing board, and we considered, just as Judge Lovelace has described, in terms of separating the 2, turning the second floor over to district court entirely and relocating Justice Court out into a modular facility. And so we began looking at and studying that. And we've got a couple of different options there. You can see that you could make it work. You could get 2 courtrooms in there and judges' chambers and offices and attorney-client meeting rooms. And so we presented a couple of different layouts for that as well. And so we also at the same time presented images. We requested images from a local temporary trailer facility manufacturer, and one that we've used in the past. We asked for images of what these things look like and what condition that they would be delivered to on site. Images that you see on the screen are example images of what's currently available out there, and you can see that they do come in rough shape. They're not in any standard or any shape for permanent facilities, so that needs to be taken into consideration. So we were asked to put together what that might cost for us to turn those modular units into a permanent freestanding building for Justice Court. And so you would no longer be renting those facilities. You would actually purchase them. And the quote that we got from Will Scott was that it would cost $1 million to purchase the 9 units so that you could get 6,400 square feet. You would have to bring them up to building code and energy code requirements. And so to rebuild them, you'd be looking at roughly $550 a square foot. So you'd be inputting another $3.5 million into those modular units for a total of $4.5 million for a permanent home for Justice Court. Again, placing that facility in the parking lot that's south of 5th Street. We knew that if that was the scenario, that you'd also still have to remodel the second floor of the existing court building, and that we needed to, again, efficiently as possible, find some place for district court to be housed temporarily. And so one of the alternatives, and we're making an assumption here, is that you would again rent a modular units and put district court in them for a temporary amount of time, approximately 19 months. You'd be about $400,000 in rental costs. And then of course you're going to need to make improvements because the condition of them as they are delivered to the site do not meet the conditions for, offices or holding court. And so there's, again, some investment for remodeling them. So $2.2 million to remodel. When you're all said and done, you're looking at about $2.6 million to house district court temporarily. And you still have the $6 million to renovate the second floor so that district court could move back over into those facilities. So if you do that scenario and you look at all your sunk costs and everything that you're investing in those two locations, you're roughly $13.6 million when everything's all said and done. We brought this information, and again, we were asked to take another look and prepare a third option. The third option that we looked at was that we went back to the master plan, and the master plan recommended that you build a new freestanding court facility, approximately 2 stories and roughly 20,000 square feet. At the time of the master plan, we had looked at placing the new courthouse north of the existing courthouse and building a connection from it over to the existing courtroom building. In this scenario, we looked at relocating it again to the parking lot south of 5th Street. And there are a couple of options. You could do as it's illustrated in the image on the right, in terms of just placing it at the back of the curb, continuing to have on-street parking and some pedestrian connections at the intersections and maybe mid-block. The other option that you could consider just from a site development would be working with the city to vacate 5th Street, closing it down to permanent traffic and moving that courthouse closer so that you'd have more of a pedestrian mall in that the new court facility closer to the existing buildings. There would be, of course, some upgrades for parking. We'll show you in a minute, there's a secured garage for offenders when you need to transfer them from the jail into the courts. And then, of course, there'll be some miscellaneous landscaping and street improvements. So in this scenario, with the 20,000 square foot facility, we had looked at clearly separating justice courts from district court. The justice court would be dedicated to the first floor, along with other ancillary support services, the clerk, the law library, and then a bailiff and security area. In this scenario, you would enter the court from 5th Street through the vestibule. There'd be a secured check-in point, but primarily your public space is kept to the front of the building, clearly separating the public space from the courtrooms and the court space. So it's a very secured scenario. These red dashed lines here indicate where you'd have secured points. So the public is really kept in one controlled area. As far as the space analysis, so Justice Court currently occupies roughly 2,400 square feet in the existing building. In this scenario, we're proposing that they would occupy 4,400 square feet. Then the other areas that are included in kind of the first floor, you've got the clerk's office that's a little less than 200 square feet, the law library, bailiff and storage, and then we have ancillary building support for stairs and elevators, break rooms, mechanical, electrical systems. The second floor of the district court it is dedicated to the district court offices and courtrooms. So again, you would have the public in a controlled space and behind secured doors. You'd have the district court offices and supports facilities. The judge's chambers and the concern from Judge Montero about kind of having that backdoor escape. We've identified that you could get a stairwell in there for both the district judge on the second floor. It would be adjacent also to the justice court chambers as well on the first floor. So in terms of floor plate, district court currently occupies about 7,200 square feet in the existing building. In the new scenario that we're illustrating here, you'd be occupying about 9,300 square feet. So again, yeah, it gives him room to grow in the future and addresses kind of his concerns about safety and being able to spread out and clearly having the space available for growth. As we prepare kind of these bubble diagrams of potential floor adjacencies and room adjacencies, we also begin to look at kind of the architecture, the exterior architecture, and what that may look like. That influences obviously cost, and there's a couple of different scenarios that we've designed and proposed. The first one draws on the kind of the architecture from the 1976 edition, more the column and the large cap on the roof. The second one draws inspiration from the original 1938 courthouse, still trying to give it a bit of a modern flair with the glass and the brick, but really trying to draw on some of the column and the arches from the original 1938 building. So with that, of course, the cost is the last question there. For 20,000 square feet, you've got basically for building and site improvements, roughly $6.8 million. There are some direct construction costs that you have to consider, which at the end of the day takes you to $12.8 million. We've estimated $1.5 million for furniture and equipment to be put back into the facility. And in today's dollars, you'd be all in at $14.3 million if it's escalated out to September of next year, which obviously it would be, you're at $15.5 million. So you can see the question before us, and then we're really at a kind of a crossroads with this project. We're looking for assistance in determining what's the best foot forward here. Is it to stay the course with option one and continue moving down the path of just remodeling what is there in terms of space on the second floor of the existing courthouse? Is it to separate the two and put justice court in a permanent modular unit and turn the second floor over to district court? Or is it to look forward into the future and plan for growth and attempt to move forward with option 3?
Excuse me, Angela.
Yes.
This is Commissioner Tipton. On option 3, I don't see the $6 million to remodel the existing facility.
It is not there, no.
All right, thank you.
Any other questions?
Commissioner Hill?
No, I don't have any questions. I've been through this a few times now.
I suppose you have.
Yeah.
Commissioner Haas?
So you got 15 and 6. Is that what you're saying?
You got 21.5 is what you've got. Do that.
I have. Excuse me, I do. Angela, if there was a new facility built, are we taking up the existing parking lot almost completely, and are we losing space for parking cars?
You will lose a portion of it, yes.
How many spaces would we be losing approximately? Do you know?
I don't know off the top of my head, sir. I can get you that count.
I really don't need to count as much as I would need a replacement for a place to park for the employees and those visiting the courthouse. What's that going to cost us to at least have what we have today?
Okay. I can get you that number.
Thank you.
Commissioner Cherry, questions?
No, I have no questions.
So we have, I guess we have 4 options. Do nothing and continue to work around. Or are there option 1 at 8.6 million, option 2 at 13, almost 13.7 million, or option 3, which is really at 21.5 million? And we don't have any money.
Well, really, do we, I mean, are we limited to those options only? I mean, I don't have any questions. I've got a lot of concerns that I think that, first of all, I always break things down into needs and wants. I know what we need. We've been told what we need is mandated is that we need to provide a courtroom for justice court. We have been talking a long time about the needs in district court, and I do believe those need to be addressed. But how much of this is really necessary? How much of it is wants? How much of it is needs? I see a lot of wants in there, I think. With you, we don't have the money. I'm not prepared to put the county in debt. And, that's just where I am. I think there's got to be other options.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
Mike Shepard, owner's representative for Humboldt County. Judge Montero and Judge Lovelace were each very careful to tell you that they're not asking you for a new facility. They said that expressly. Commissioner Cherry asked each of them the pointed question that was the same thing. Are they asking for a new facility? My observation about those comments, you already heard the complete evolution of the planning that this group of people evolved to the point where we were thinking we're close to designing the remodel of this building over here. And 2 meetings ago, we convened in this room almost to a revelation of both judges saying, this is not going to work. It's not going to work for us. You're taking this exact same square footage, you're losing a hallway, you're gaining an exit path, and you're going to spend a bunch of money that Angela characterized as sunk money. So I have to say that I do very much appreciate the efficiency with which the governing entities in Humboldt County and the city of Winnemucca operate compared to other counties. The hospital, the county, and the city are careful not to put themselves in an indebted position. And as a taxpayer and a resident, I very much appreciate that. When I look at the spectrum of what you have here, this idea of converting a temporary thing to is just a horrible idea. Should never be considered. Option 1, which is your least cost, and I don't know what you can afford, it's your least cost. If that's your option, when you get done with it, you're already behind. That's been made very clear. You're behind. You're behind right now. Judge Montero mentioned short term. There is no short term. You're past short term right now because you're already past what you need and it doesn't work well. So, you know, am I suggesting that what you need to do is the $15 to $20 million? Well, it's not my place to suggest that. But my observation is that whenever they built this marvelous building we're sitting in, I'm just not sure what the people thought about the money they were spending as opposed to, you know, building something they could get by with. So you really need to think about your public infrastructure. Is it the right decision for the residents of Winnemucca and Humboldt County, citizens and the voters, to be planning to have a justice facility? Is that an important thing to have? Do we need that? Are we growing? Each of the judges talked about all these new trials they're going to have and all the problems they had accommodating and moving around town into all these other buildings, having things. Manager Mendiola mentioned all the other facilities that you have some strains with. And what he didn't mention is at least 2 facilities I know of that you rent places. So, you know, it's nobody wants to be in the commission's position of committing to bonding or borrowing. But the decisions to put in public infrastructure like this, they're bold decisions. And if you make that decision, you're going to face a lot of criticism. You can always be efficient. You already got a building that you're way behind on. All of your mechanical systems are outdated and inefficient and are going to progressively give you a lot more problem. And this isn't somebody's rental building. This is a public facility in Humboldt County. And unfortunately, that's why you're here. That's sort of the elephant in the room, if you will. Nobody wants to say, you know, let's go out and bond this and borrow the money or however you do it. So I just, for what it's worth to you, that's what we were told. Commissioner Hill, when you were at that meeting, didn't each of us like, we've been working on this for 2 years. What happened? We came to this meeting and we found out what we're doing here after all of these changes that Angela explained, we started out with these modest things, and the more we heard, the more that had to be done for it to work for them. And when we finally thought we had the magic, we come to a meeting and the judges bumped into one another in the hallway and had looked us over. What I understood was it wasn't going to work. What we were doing wasn't going to work. So I guess the simple thing, not be criticized, you do option one. But the consequence is, because of the time frame, probably spend more than that, and you won't be done.
I do not disagree with you, Mr. Shepherd. I really don't. But I think we need to put that out on the floor of if we are going to go forward, and not if, we will have to go forward with something. We need to look at all the options of how you would afford any of it, because we don't have that sitting in our building reserve today to do it.
I just have a comment, Mr. Chair. Commissioner Hill. So, yeah, I am on the steering committee. And I think that's great. Why, we get together, we get engineering firms involved, and we start looking at options. We had a complaint. We try to address it. And as we move through the process, we find that we have fixes or small temporary fixes, and it really doesn't satisfy all of our needs. So we ask for other things to be done and looked at, and that's great. That's the way the process works. That's what we're supposed to do, to try to be as efficient as possible. But when we weren't satisfied with being able to create more room in those courthouses, we asked them to look at creating space. So in that, I feel that if we do go with option one at this point, that we're just satisfying a short term, and like Mr. Shepherd said, we're already behind. So to me, that's in a sense a waste of money to put all that work into it to be done, and then have come here a week later and say, you've moved the furniture. It looks a lot nicer, but it really didn't fix our issues. So so that's why we asked for the courthouse. And I mean, we've talked about this 3 times today, but my personal feelings, like the rest of the commissioners, we don't have the money to just go outright pay for it. So we're faced with some tough decisions today. Do we borrow the money? Do we, we've Dave and Gina have looked at other sources, and how can we round up this money? And it's not possible. Personally, I'm not comfortable with going into debt. I'm not comfortable with the bonding. But I'm a fighter. So I'm also don't think that we're done exploring options. We have a sheriff's department that's in there. It's been talked about in the master plan about moving them. That's another option. Do we keep running at this and look at moving them out of here and turning those 2 floors into court? Does it make more sense? We just spent $1 million paving the parking lot out there that we're going to go and tear up. There's stuff that we've done that maybe we're walking over and wasting money on. Is this the time where we open our minds up and look a little bigger instead of just courts? Do we try to fix the sheriff's office, get them, a facility where they need to be, and fix the courts and able to keep them on site? So just things that I'm really turning around. I think it's honestly turned into a way bigger animal than I anticipated with my first meeting on that steering committee. So I really don't think we're done exploring options, and I don't think we're wasting CTA's time. I think we're paying them well. Costs aren't going down, like I said, I'm a fighter, and I don't think we've explored all the options. And I would really like to continue to explore until it works for everybody, I guess, if that's even possible. Just some of my thoughts.
Commissioner Haas?
Mr. Chair. Reiterating on what Commissioner Hill just said. About a year ago, we were over there at the detention center. We took a tour of it. It's in need of replacement. So, if you take that into consideration, you take the moving of the sheriff's department and doing all this. I mean, we haven't even hit a small portion of what is needed. And we don't have the money. I mean, and what I think is lacking in this is if they're going to throw these numbers at us like this, is we need to know how it's going to affect the taxpayer. We're going to have more money somehow, and we're not interested in raising taxes. So how would we do it? And what would it cost taxpayers? I mean, the ones that are in the room here are very good at what they do, and they can tell us how or what we could move around or how we could do it and what it would cost. But what's it going to cost, everybody that lives here? And that's going to have a major concern there. And we're having outside stuff coming in from the state and federal governments that are mandating this stuff. So how do we deal with it when we don't have that kind of money to deal with it? So I think we need to do some more research into this and get some finalized numbers, or at least figure out where it's going to come from.
Thank you. Commissioner Cherry, comments?
I think Commissioner Hill summed up my feelings too quite well. I don't think we're out of options. I think there's got to be. And I appreciate the work that everyone's done. Don't get me wrong. That got it over and over. But what everybody is saying, and I agree with, we don't have the money. We've identified. Gina has identified. The judge at one time was willing to help share in these costs too. When we're looking at our original proposals, we could probably come up $6-8 million right now and not put the county in debt. We can't do that with, I would assume we're talking 21 million right now. By the time we get it built, if it came in at that, I would be surprised. Rarely do these projects come in at budget. We're going to be talking a lot more than that. We don't have it right now. The way things are looking, I think that, if you listen to the news, we're headed into a recession probably. If we aren't in one right now, things are not looking real good to get in debt right now. That's where I am on it. I see an option presented today that I can think maybe the first one is the closest I can come, but that doesn't solve all the problems. But we can afford it.
Mr.
That's
Chair.
it.
So in thinking this through here, so one of the goals I had today was to take these options, and I'm perfectly fine with looking at other options. When we did the original master plan, we looked at using this back lot back here, the buildings and grounds use. We talked about a building back there. We talked about moving the sheriff out first and building a facility there. And then, like I talked about earlier, then redoing that space. So we've looked at a lot of different options. We certainly can go back and continue to do that. And I agree with you. I think we should. But my big goal today was and Commissioner Haas hit it on the nose, is I would like to get a direction from you today to have us go and find out what are the sources of funding that are out there. For example, public-private is a possibility. They do that. It's like a lease, essentially. You know, we can bond these things. In the end, though, you know, it's one of those things where it's going to cost us money, whether it's a monthly lease payment, you know, or bonding when a tax based through some kind of a tax increase. But I think that's the next step, so that at the very least, we can come back and say, you know, if it's 21 million, here's what you're looking at. If it's 25 million, 30 million, you know, in today's dollars, for example, that's the direction I'd like to get from you today, so that Gina and I'll go do our due diligence along with CTA and Mike, because they're used to doing these things. We'll come back with another presentation that won't necessarily be specific to any one option, but here's what the funding mechanism looks like, and here would be the impact to our citizens. Okay, that's what I'd like to get from this, so that we can kind of keep moving forward. And while we're at it, we can continue to look at some other potential options. And that would be my goal for this portion of what we're talking about today. The buildings and grounds piece is a little different animal because we've already got cash in the bank to do that. But there is a decision you need to make on that one too. But for this particular discussion, I never really thought for a moment that you were going to make a decision on, you know, 1, 2, or 3. I really don't believe that. My goal today is just to simply give me some direction. I think the next answer is financing. How do we do it? And come back with some real solid options. And then you'll have a much better idea of what the real impact is to your community and your constituents.
Thank you, Dave. I appreciate that. When I look at this, I think number 1 is an option. I think number 2 is just not an option at all. I don't see that. Number 3, I'd like to see more information there. I do think that's easy to do. Throw the 6 million back in there for the renovation, but I think it's more than that, because if you go into the next item and you talk about buildings and grounds and you pull them out of where they are today, something needs to be done to that piece of the building as well. So there's some more millions.
Yeah.
And then, as you had indicated, if you were to end up going with an option 3, then you would be moving other offices, possibly district attorney's offices and whatnot, into this building. Now you got another building that needs to be renovated or something done with it. So I would like to see a real full picture of what we'd be dealing with. Future meeting. Anybody else have any questions or comments?
No, just Commissioner Hill, just in closing, you know, I just want to thank Mike and CTA group, you know, working through this and the patients. I guess that's how it works. And I'm, I guess, thankful that we can have the patience to work through it and send it back to the drawing board. And I'm confident in the end that we will come up with the best solution that's the most cost effective for Humboldt County and is going to serve our departments the best way possible. So thank God for no rash decisions.
My first thought is just do nothing. That's my first thought, because we're getting by. But then, you know, and Mr. McDonald brought it up to me before the meeting, you know, as a county, and we have to decide, you know, do we want our district attorney to try cases?
Yeah.
Do we want to keep the community safe? You know, that all lays into that. So
We've got to do something to continue to be effective and efficient. We've just got to be smart about it.
okay. You have questions? Comments? No? Okay.
So Mr. Chair, Dave Mendiola, so Mike, would we be appropriate, based on the language in the agenda, to have a motion to direct myself and Gina to work with CTA and Mr. Shepherd to look at these funding options and to bring something back at a future date? Is that?
The agenda is pretty broad. I mean, it's talking about regarding current status of several capital projects being considered relating to the district and justice court. Commission will also discuss potential financing sources. I think the commission can give direction as far as, you know, we're not going to make any decisions today and want some additional input. I think that clearly that's falls within this. We're, you know, really don't have enough details, specific details to make any action other than that. To say we need more information at this time.
And that was my intention, Mr. Chair, was just to get some direction to take another step in the process to help provide the information the board will need to make a decision at some point in time.
I guess, and Commissioner Hill, again, we've identified that we need to do something. We need to move forward, but we need the money. We got to find the money. So I think that would be appropriate to make a motion to the fact that I'll just try it. So I want to make a motion.
Please proceed.
I would make a motion that we direct the county manager to work with Gina in exploring funding options for any of these options for solving our courthouse dilemma.
Okay. We have a motion on the floor. Any questions? Comments? All in favor, signify. You got a comment, Commissioner Haas?
Well, I'm working on it. On top of the money needed for this, and it's a much needed change and a much needed area that we need to make it easier for the judges and the DA to do their jobs. We've also got another one out there that's, it's already been started. It's going to cost us many millions of dollars for a sewage that is even as critical as this or even more critical. So we need to look down the road. We can't just look at something like this or that, or, you know, you've got the courthouse, you've got the sewer system, and you've got the detention center. So how do we, over a period of time, you know, afford all that? So I'd like to see that looked at also, you know, on the overall scope of it, and look down the line of what we're going to have to do all of it. Because we will eventually have to do all of it. And how many years is that going to take us to do that? And what kind of, you know, what's it going to do to the taxpayer?
So, Mr. Chair, let me comment to Commissioner Haas. I agree with you. We really got to look at all of them, but they're kind of, in my mind, they're a little different. The sewage system in Grass Valley is specific to Grass Valley residents. And I think, at least to me, the commissioners have been very clear that any kind of costs should be assumed by those users of that system out there and not by all taxpayers. So what we're trying to do is, if you recall, is trying to get enough money. There's a big ARPA bucket out there, which is really a mystery. Where Gina and I have been talking about it for months now. That's still waiting. They did a listening tour. They came out. They know exactly what we need. It's infrastructure, and they very specifically say sewage collection and treatment. So we fit the model perfectly. It is my hope, and I'm just throwing these numbers out there, that of that $6.7 billion the state got, that the county could get maybe 15 or 20 million of that, okay, to cover the sewage system, the collection system, and the facility itself, which would then leave us with about 10 to 15 million to cover, which there's lots of funding sources for that. USDA, state revolving fund. We're working with WNDD. There's 2 other grants that we're going to engage with a grant writer I mentioned to you all in the past. And I think that we're going to be able to scratch together enough money so that the impact on those residents of just Grass Valley, should be palatable. But we don't know yet until we know what that state number is. Okay. But I kind of put that one off in a different category. It's the same process, but it's a little different. That one we plan on well, I've never considered coming to the board and asking for any money from the general fund or anything else for that. That's a project that needs to stay where it's at, and we need to find the funding and from other sources. And by the way, there's a lot of sources out there. It's just whether we can scrape up the full amount. That's the question. So for example, we did run a scenario as part of our preliminary engineering report that I should have any day now, where if we got no funding, how much would it cost every individual resident in Grass Valley? And we're kind of getting off track here, but I'll just finish with this. And it was like $175 a month per residence. Well, that's not going to happen, obviously. So what we need to do is if we can find $20 million or $25 million, and then we can go get a USDA loan to cover the difference. Then we're looking at over 40 years, we're looking at more like $30 to $40 a month, much like the city did with their new system. So that's what we're doing on that one. So I agree with you that we need to look at that and use that and always be aware of it. But I think it's a different animal kind of in the way.
Well, I
we're gonna
agree.
fund it.
It's all got to be done.
Yeah.
So, I mean, we've been working on the sewer for quite some time already. And we haven't come up with a amount of money that we could do it on yet.
Right.
Okay, so that's a project there.
Right.
You know, we're putting money toward that just to get that project done. And it's just throwing out what we have to do. I mean, it isn't just this, it isn't just that, you know, it encompasses the whole thing. So.
Yeah.
And I've been asked about it, you know, already on the sewer, and what it's gonna cost, and I have no idea. And that's what I tell them, we haven't got there yet.
Yeah.
So.
Mr. Chair, if I may, Mike McDonald, for the record, part of Commissioner Haas's comment and question related to the other needs, some of the other needs of just the county government as well existing. And I think that involves the review or update of the master plan that was put together. Look, those needs were identified a couple years back. Some of that has changed. Maybe some of our views of what the future and future growth or expansion may require, I think, have to be looked at as well, in addition to just this project. Because, you know, for years there have been discussions with different other offices talking about, we don't have additional room. Do I need a person or a file cabinet to fill that, what little space is left in that office? And so those things I think are important for us to maybe put on a future agenda to revisit, to look at the other governmental offices within the county and the needs. Thank you.
Thank you. So we have a motion on the floor. Commissioner Cherry, do you have any comments on that motion?
I have no comments. I like the motion. And I want to just say for the record that I appreciate work Jesse and everyone has done so far. And the proposal, I mean, it was really good information today, and seeing those proposals is kind of a wake up. This is all going to cost. Anyway, I want to thank them for the work they've done.
Okay, thank you. So we have a motion on the floor. All in favor, say aye.
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 Motion passes unanimous. Okay,
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, commissioners. Appreciate that. So the next item that we'd like to deal with here is the buildings and grounds new shop to get them out of the basement of the courthouse here. We have talked about a couple scenarios. One, we originally were looking at the Bingo Chia Circle site where the Quonset huts are currently, right next to the road department. So what we've done here, CTA went up and looked at the site.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I don't know if you guys can hear me, but we seem to have lost communication.
Are you still there? We can hear you.
Dave was
Yeah.
passing out some information, Commissioner Cherry.
Oh, okay.
I went to go check because I thought it
Yeah,
went out.
sorry about that. I was passing some stuff out. Vanna White work.
We went 7 on it.
So going back to buildings and grounds, and Ron, let me see if I can quickly bring up that drawing or that information to you so you can see what we're talking about. Let's see here. Buildings. What's it doing? Yeah, and I don't have it right in front of me. I know I've got it somewhere, but for the sake of time, essentially what I've done, Commissioner Cherry, is this was an email that we got from Angela Hansen after their assessment of the site at Bengachia Circle. And then in the second page is a breakdown of the cost to prepare that site for a building. So suffice it to say, we've already begun the process of asbestos mitigation. And one of those sites you approved at the last meeting on Monday to go ahead and clean that asbestos out. The next decision up there will be to do the same for 2 other Quonset huts. That'll be in before you, I think, on June 6th. And then get that asbestos. So at least we have clean facilities up there and all that's out of there. And then that's why I really thought it was important that we have this discussion today, because we do have an option, at least potentially an option. And that is that if we were to go to Bengachia Circle, which is, again, that's a property we own, there'd be no cost for buying it. However, as you can see on page 2 here, the total cost, Commissioner Cherry, we're projecting about $473,000 to do the civil work and put up a wall to make sure that we don't have runoff and problems. To flatten that out, it's got quite a elevation on it, so it would take some work. And of course, that's a far cry from the 800,000 we originally thought it might take to do that. But still, we have in the budget for FY23 $1 million that was set aside for that project. So if we went that direction, the good news is we do have power nearby. That'd be easy to get to. We do have systems available in terms of utilities to it. But again, half of that $1 million would be spent just preparing the site. And then what we did after that, we'd have a additional money. But so that's one option. And what I want to come out of here today was a direction, again, if possible, which way you want us to go. And that means there is a property available, and we have talked to the owners. Commissioner Tipton has talked to the owners, so have I. They're very much willing to talk to us. It's right next to the Maverick on East Winnemucca Boulevard, and it's already flattened. Utilities, power, everything is there. That's the good news. We just don't know how much it's going to cost to acquire it. So what I would like, if you want me to, again, look at this option, is to direct me to get an appraisal on the property. And if I can't do that today in a motion, Mr. DA, then I can certainly bring it back on June 6th to do that. But that would probably cost us, I'm not sure, 10,000, maybe $7,000 to $10,000 for an appraisal. Maybe not that much. Maybe I'm over guessing that. But at least we would know Because, you know, as it works as a government entity, we can't just enter in negotiations of what they think it's worth. We have to get 2 appraisals. And if that individual owner wants to sell to us, they would have to accept the lower of the 2 appraisals. That's just interesting, speaking to us. So if you want me to go further so that we can then really compare what it would cost there, you know, we threw around some numbers a year or 2 when we were talking about this, I think, Mike, about to get that property, it was about 350,000 at the time. Again, that was no appraisal, just guessing based on, you know, acreage at the time and square footage. So that's what we need to talk about. If you want to go forward and let's just do Bengachia Circle, great. Again, we have the money. We have $1 million set aside for that. If you don't, and we want to look at this other option, and that could be for several reasons. Number one, it's pretty much site ready. But also it's more centrally located in town. That might be a good thing. There's good things to be said about Bengachia Circle in that it is right next to our shop. It gives us a complex up there of all of our maintenance and both road, public works and this. And so that's where we're at today. And that's kind of the direction I need from the commission.
Thank you, Mr. Mendiola. One thing I looked at on this handout that we were given here, and I know nothing about construction, so I ask a question that's a little stupid, that's understandable. On site preparation, have we looked at all what our county road crew could do with the equipment that we have?
Right. And that's one of the things that she mentions. I don't know if it's in this email here, but she and I, Angela and I, have talked about that. If Dawn has the availability and the time, we could reduce that work by, say it would be Honeywell or DeLong or whoever. We might be able to reduce that cost a lot if Dawn can do the work. So that's a possibility, absolutely.
Okay. Commissioner Hill?
Yeah, I have a question, Commissioner Hill here. I guess for Angela, since you guys prepared all this, is there opportunity, not necessarily just the dirt work, but I assume this site improvements of 50,000 and would probably require some retaining walls and stuff for slope stability. Is it? And I understand, you know, using retaining walls to utilize as much ground as possible and build on a smaller footprint, but where we're really not, you know, constrained to room up there, could we slope that out a little more and go to like a 4-to-1 or a 5-to-1 slope on some of those banks and zero scape them and retain them that way versus, you know, going in with an engineered block or something and save some money that way?
You can, yeah, Commissioner Hill. The numbers that we provided to you did not, or I shouldn't say did not, was basically just to prep the pad. So you can't have a 4-to-1 slope on a building pad. So yeah, it would be the side slopes. You could certainly do that, but to get a flat surface just for your building itself, you're going to need some sort of retaining wall up there.
Okay, yeah, and what I was referring to is the ends of the flat pad, you know, where we're looking at grade changes there. We could just slope them off
You
versus
could, yeah.
straight retaining wall. I mean, I know but this paper didn't include any of that. This was just basically a flat site preparation.
Correct, yeah. It's just prep the pad and get your utilities extended in there.
Okay. Thank you.
Mhm.
Commissioner Haas? Comments, questions?
This is Commissioner Haas. Dave, what's the size of the building? You haven't included that in this.
Of the buildings and shop building that they want to build.
Yes.
I don't think we've ever gone that far, have we, Jeff? No. We have a kind of a general idea of what we want to accommodate, because as you know, downstairs we have a painting room, we have a welding area, a shop area, wood shop area. So we've got some general ideas, but we haven't gotten as far as, you know, actually having CTA do some drawings for us.
then how can they tell us what it's gonna cost us to prepare it if they don't know how large it's gonna be?
This is just to get it ready to build something.
Okay, so anyway, revisited it, okay? And since I originally brought it up, we can do all of that work in-house as far as getting the preparation for the pad and cutting that hill out of there, not having to put in retaining walls. And, you know, we could remove this. And the cost of the building, I mean, you're not even telling us what the cost of the building is. I figured that they could put a building up there for about 200,000 and have all the room, have the office, have everything that they need. And so we could, you know, come well below that 100,000, especially if we get rid of the $200,000 needed for the slab. And, you know, we already did a shop up there for the second shop for the road department.
Mhm.
And we didn't spend this kind of money on it. So you know, we're still working on this facility. We want to give them a nice facility, but I don't think we need to spend that kind of money on it. And we've got all the equipment we need up there and the time to do it, you know, to take and make that so that we could do that. Right there where we've talked about already, without having to go out and buy any more land. We've got plenty of land, you know, and we've got everything there pretty much to hook to this. So
Mhm.
that would be my preference, is to look into that more rather than going out
Yep.
and spending money on appraisals and spending money on another piece
Well,
of property.
that's why we're here. Exactly.
Yeah, I have a comment on that, if I could,
Go
Mr.
ahead.
Chair. You know, I think that's a great concept and a great idea to have our people, you know, prepare this pad. My concern with that is, you know, we have an obligation to take care of roads and haul gravel and do all the stuff that Don does. You know, I would like him involved before we make those kinds of decisions, before we ask his group to do stuff that honestly, some of that civil work could be completely out of our wheelhouse. You know, there's a lot of stuff there that requires surveying and, you know, ground compaction and x-raying and stuff like that. That may be just out of our wheelhouse. So it sounds great, but I don't know how feasible that is. And I want to make sure that we're not just asking for that. But with that, I do think there are some savings, you know, like I talked about with the retaining walls and stuff. I don't know how tight we need to make that ground, and how, you know, do we really need the retaining walls to keep a certain footprint when we have more land than we probably need. So there may be some opportunity for some slope work there versus retaining walls. And like Tom said, the building, I guess we really need to know what, you know, are we looking at 100 by 100? Are we looking at a 200 by 200? Are we looking at a 40 by 60? Is it a pole barn? Is it a metal building? Or we look, you know, what are we looking at? And I think, in Dave's defense, I think that number, that $1 million number, was just kind of a thrown out there number of, you know, we would all want to build it for as cheap as we can. I think that's pretty evident in this commission that we want to try to do that, but cheaply doesn't always mean that that's the best value for our citizens either. You know, we got to look at what's going to keep us operating and what's going to give us the best bang for our buck and longevity, I guess, too. So,
Mr. Shepherd, you had a comment?
Mr. Chairman, that particular site where those two Quonsets are is an expensive and impractical place to build a building. So let's back up to what I think you might need to build. I don't know the total scope of what buildings and grounds need, but I would speculate they need a minimum of 6,000. And I think earlier Enoch had his idea of around 10,000. So you're not going to work with a 3,000-foot building or even a 5, I don't think it's going to accommodate what I've heard them talk about they need in terms of shop space and storage and those kinds of things. So you're a minimum of 6,000 feet of building. Shouldn't be over 10,000 feet. So forgetting about your site work, you're going to spend way north of $1 million just for your building. So, that is beyond your prep. And your decision here is what kind of ground you need. That particular location that is being discussed is a terrible location. You have the delta, you have a sloped street here and buildings up here. So you've got to get, if you could succeed in getting it level, you've got to build it up or cut it down. If you cut it down, you got to retain it. If you cut it down and you've cut over here, you're still sloping over here. So your accessibility of utilizing this, remember, the footprint of your building, that's just part of what you need. If you triple the footprint of your building, that's what you need for some kind of a site, for a fenced area, for your outdoor storage and the other things you need. And when you're sitting on a side of a hill, you don't put the building on the side of a hill and you don't want your site on the side of a hill, just grade it out. You've got to have a logical plane that drains properly. So I think your site preparation is going to be in this range. Now, Don's on this call here. I see him up here, and he can probably speak for himself. But, I think that, Jesse made the comment that's a little bit out of their wheelhouse. It isn't what they do. It's not that they can't take their loaders in there and their dump trucks and start cutting out. I'm sure they could cut some of that out. But site preparation is much different. Just go around to any of these jobs and watch what Lauren Honeywell does. It's not the same thing that Don and his crew do. So it didn't matter if he can do it or if someone like Honeywell does it. That site is going to be challenging to make a workable place that's going to function well. Now, if you can go, like you mentioned, Tom, that, you built that pole barn up there for storage and stuff, works great. Up in, I don't know how much area you own, if you're up on a flat spot or an area that the site prep isn't as bad, that
Which way are you going to come into this?
where your county shop is.
Yeah.
And then you built a pole barn recently somewhere around that.
Top of it.
And I don't know how much area that, if there's area that you could put this, shop there, but that sloped area is sure a really tough area. And, the problem you have is to even cut this out, to get it down to grade, you can't just cut it out with the other Quonset hats that the veterans are in sitting up there. You got to retain it first. You got to drive pilings. You got to do something. You can't just go in there and scoop it out and leave that sitting up there, with its foundation. So it's a really tough spot to work. And I think that's why.
Does the size of the building have any figure on this? I mean,
I think it does.
6,000 to 10,000 square feet. How big is their basement here? How big is the basement on this?
What is the footprint of this thing? This box is.
I mean, it's a small basement.
Yeah.
We have, and they have been using
Yeah,
a very small area,
yeah,
and they don't need 6,000 to 10,000 square feet.
yeah. Jeff will
Or
probably have a better
shop.
idea than I have, but
So
I think it's going to be,
What's 3/4? But it's probably about
Come on up, Jeff.
3/4 of the full.
Enoch gave him the duty. Yeah. Right?
about 7,500 if it's close to the other floor, so it's about 7,200 square feet. It's gonna be close to the other two floors.
Yeah.
Call it
You're
7,000.
using for your shop less than a third of that. And that's all you need to do what you guys need. We don't need all the storage down there. This whole basement is full of stuff that,
Where are we gonna put that stuff out of the basement when we move? What are you gonna do with all the stuff that's there now? what we got stored there.
Well, it doesn't sound to me like they're gonna use the basement for much else then. You know, I'm sure that we can, get it figured
Yeah.
out, but why should we put that, all that paint and why should we put all the paint and all of the flammable stuff in the same building with you? When you're using, torches, you're using sparks, you're doing all sorts of stuff. Why should we have a building that has all of that stuff in it and then ask you to go in there and work in there?
Yeah, well, that's the way it is at the moment. And my thought on doing what we're doing up there would be to have two separate buildings,
Yes.
like two pole barns. Put like two pole barns at the side and put your offices across the front. Then you've got an area in between what you could use for outside storage too, if you had to. But you could store flammables away from hot sparks and do woodwork over on the other side, separate your work areas.
Yeah, well, you have to separate the buildings, I believe.
Yeah.
In order to make it safe for you.
Yeah.
And the rest of our
Yeah.
employees.
Yep.
Okay, so why would we want to put 6,000, 10,000 square foot shop in there? I don't think that you need that big of a shop.
Wouldn't we, this Commissioner Hill, wouldn't we want to get all that chemical and everything out of the courthouse if we're going to do this project, get everything out of here?
It's been there for how long now?
I know, but
You
if we're
know,
going to
I
move
agree with
forward, yeah, we should get it all out of
I
here.
was very appalled when we went
Yeah.
downstairs and here's our employees all in and around that, So 2 buildings up there, as he's saying, would probably work a whole lot better, for the storage.
And for separation.
And Dave already told me if I could go down there and clean that all out for him. So, I mean, there's stuff down there that we may never use again, that nobody's had time to look at. But, I think a very nice shop for you guys to work in up there, or an office in the shop, could be built for a whole lot less than $1 million. And even a storage building, doing the same. I mean, we built those buildings up there, the new shop up there. I think we built that for a little over 100,000. So, there you are. So that's my only argument on this thing. And I know that we may not be able to do the site preparation. And I thought I mentioned that in here, but we can do the dirt work with our own people and get that ready and bring that up to where somebody else can walk in there and put the site preparation in for the foundations and go to town building. So.
Let me,
Go ahead, Commissioner Hill.
this is for, Mr. Shepherd. We don't know what that other property would cost, but obviously you think there's a better site. If we were to pick another site, do you think we would be money ahead by investing into some, appraisals for a different piece of property?
Mike Shepherd. I believe the site that Dave is looking at next to the Maverick is an ideal place to build, whether it's a county shop or any other kind of facility like that. I mean, it's going to develop nicely. There's a lot of grade changes. I think your utility aspect works pretty well. So among the places in town you could build, that's probably more logical than some. It doesn't have quite the same challenges as what you own. But that's, I guess that's the chicken and egg deal is, what is the size of your shop and
Yeah.
how will it work if you put it up on the property that you own? I
Yeah.
just think it'll be really expensive to build, and I don't think it's going to be a very efficient. When it's all done and you've got it all fenced in and you're building there, I just, that street going up at an angle and the Veterans Building up here and the other old Recce building down here. And then, the intervening area is also a sloped area, so you've got to contour all that and make it work. It's certainly doable.
Yeah.
And you'll save some money, Dawn is staying awful quiet on here, but you know, about how much that
Yeah.
he would do. But the other is just easier to develop. And site work is on the projects that we do, the single largest cost on every project we do is the site development, which means the grading, the paving, the utilities, and building the pad lots. So that's the biggest cost. Next is the mechanical, next is the electrical, and then the next is the building.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think Commissioner Haas had, you know, a good point. Until we know the footprint, we really don't know what kind of ground we're going to have to disturb there. I think CTA probably, I would assume, kind of shot in the middle there somewhere, or shot on the higher end of, you know, what this whole footprint would look like. So trying to get us an idea. I mean, that's kind of fear that we're getting a little in the weeds. I mean, our job here is to decide, do we want to spend money, and are we spending money effectively, and, you know, let the professionals do their jobs. I mean, it's good to question this stuff, but at the end of the day, we're here to allocate money if that's our job to do it.
We need some more.
And we do need information. Yeah,
So Mr. Chairman, Mike Shepard, again, so here's a sort of a benchmark to look at. Here a year or so ago, the Peraldo Coors facility was sitting over there for sale. It's about a 10,000 foot masonry structure. If you built it today, it'd be tremendously expensive. It seems to me it was offered in the $500,000 range, something like that. And we looked at it, and what it looked like is if you spent 400,000 or $500,000, built it, and put a $500,000 in it, you had $1 million in that thing, you would have had the ideal. It needed a lot of work. There's problems in that building. But if you'd have paid a $500,000, put a $500,000 in it, you're in $1 million. It'd have been a bargain. Right now, today, building costs are completely out of hand. So maybe before you get appraisals, you know, I don't know of any buildings that are for sale that would be logical. I guess taking a second look, because building a building today versus buying one at a deflated cost, there's a huge delta. The county just got a bid to build a bathroom, $762,000 for a bathroom. You're remodeling 2 library bathrooms over here for $270,000. Just not seeing anything constructed. We can't hardly do anything for $1 million anymore. The jobs we're doing. So that's the only other option I know that you have.
I think that's why we're asking so many questions, because it's
Mr.
just,
Haas?
This is Commissioner Haas again. I completely agree with you. I don't have anything, you know, there. Another thing that you don't take into consideration that we have to take into consideration is we already own the land, okay? We go buy another piece of ground. How do you think that the county gets their money? It's from taxing things that are built. Now, why would we want to go out there and spend, and that ground's going to cost us probably between 300,000 and 500,000 or more. And then we're going to put a building on it. And we take away all of our tax revenues for that piece of property. Why not let that be there? Why not sell it to a private person and let them build it? And then they can pay taxes on it, and we can prosper, you know, and do other things. That's what I'm looking at also. You know, it to take all the, and that's a great place to put a private, you know, and that's why the gas station put it in there. Okay, and why they're there. And so why would we want to take that off the market, you know, just to put in a shop? We do need the shop, but I think we can find, you know, another place to do it rather than going out and buying more property. So. Thank you.
Mr. Chair.
I think Angela had her hand up earlier, but it's not now. If she still wanted to comment.
Oh, I was just gonna say, I jumped out and looked at the master plan. In our, review of that back in 2018, we'd estimated 8,500 square feet on that shop.
What was that number again?
8,500 square feet.
8,500.
Mhm.
Right. Yeah, that's way too big.
You think?
Mr. Chair.
Yes, Commissioner Cherry.
Yeah, I thought I ought to weigh in since I do have some opinions. When I saw this on the agenda, I thought, well, why do we need to buy more ground? We have ground. Those Quonset huts have lived their usefulness, their soar and no use really to us right now at all. Someday they're going to have to be removed. So, even regardless of what it costs, we're going to have to get them out of there some point. I like the location. Mr. Shepard's expertise and advice on this, that does change a little bit my thoughts on maybe this, maybe that it is or isn't the best place. I like the idea of what for storage and hazardous materials and that stuff, and maybe that would also, two smaller buildings might take care of some of, and maybe it won't. Mike can answer this, but whether that would on that, we could, I guess, stair step them instead of leveling all that off, which I can see would be difficult. I also was thinking kind of along the lines that Commissioner Haas just brought up, that I think the government already owns too much of Humboldt County, and our county government to buy property that is on the tax rolls and could potentially be a site for some business that could be beneficial to the county. I'm not really in favor of us purchasing any more land. We already own enough land. So if we can do it up there, that is my choice. If it's not doable, then we either find another site, or maybe this is the one we're talking about, but that's my opinion.
Thank you, Commissioner. So it appears to me that for right now, we don't have any appetite to get an appraisal. I think we need more information on that site. Make sure we know what size of a building or buildings we want to proceed with, and see if it's doable there. If it's not doable, then we can take a look at another area.
Yeah, and Mr. Chair, Dave Mendiola. So that's kind of where I'm thinking at this point in time is, first of all, I think we need to revisit the CTA's. I don't remember if we did drawings, Angela, or not on that 8,500 square foot building. But if not, we need to probably get that done so that we can look at both if it accomplishes the needs of buildings and grounds and what the cost would be. That'd be one. That'll give us a size, and then we can see how it fits on that particular parcel and have that, I think, probably stick to that and then come back, talk about that. And if we're good to go, then we'll move forward with it. If we're not, and we want to look at other buildings, we can parallel, we can be looking at another building or something that's already in place as well. I don't know that there was a lot. When we did that the first time, Mike, I didn't think we found but one, and that's gone now, so.
Mr. Chairman, I have a suggestion that I think will give you the direction you need. If you make a motion to retain a civil engineer to go in and get it surveyed and create the initial design concept for what would be practical to do. You'll need to survey it. Then they will figure out how you get a pad for a building, tell you where your utilities are, And when they get done with that, they're going to tell you what the practical building pad is going to be. You'll have a lot of answers for, I don't know the number, $10,000. You hire, there's a number of civil engineers. You could have Fire West, they would do work for you. You could have Summit Engineering, they do work. You get a civil engineer to go survey that and figure out how you're going to retain it, how you're going to create that site to put the building on. The building's a whole different thing. But that's going to give you a lot of answers. It's going to tell you, when a civil goes through that, they can run all the numbers for you. They'll have them. They'll have all the unit numbers and they can plug in approximate prices. You're going to know how big a building you can put there. You're going to know how it would function, and you're going to know what approximate cost of development of the site would be. That would be money well spent. It'd be better than spent on an appraiser. If, because it's clear the commission really like to be there for a lot of good reasons. That's how you're going to get to that decision, is if you hire a civil engineer, you got a hell of a lot better investment than the appraiser.
Thank you. We use Far West all the time.
Right. And we do have a master agreement with them.
Right. How do you feel about that? I think that's a good idea myself.
I think it could be done up there. And I think that, going out and looking at other properties and have to go out and spend $10,000, $15,000, $20,000 to tell us what they're worth. It's just money thrown up in the wind.
No, but if we
But,
want to proceed with this Benghazi Circle property, we need to get to the point where we know how big a building we can put, what the building format would have to look like, and kind of what the cost to get there would be. And so
I get, suggestions on 2 smaller buildings. One for chemicals and different stuff that we keep around, make it so it's safe and away from the others to a degree. And they don't need a 6,000 to 10,000 square foot shop for what they do. And I can say that because I have 2 shops myself. I went through what I have, what I've got in there, and I've been downstairs and I know what they have had to use, and it's a whole lot smaller than my shops. So we give them a decent shop, decent place to be, everything is there. And that's what it's for. It's for a shop, not for storage, but for a work area for you guys. Plus you can put an office in there also. So you have everything you need right there. And then we go, like your suggestion, to go over and do another building for storage. If we're going to keep all that stuff or go through what we have in the basement, see whether we need it or not. There's a lot of chemicals down there. I don't know what they're stored there for. They haven't been out of the basement in a long time. So there's other things involved in this, but I want to see you in a shop that you can use and be safe. And, when we ask you to do something, you can go ahead and do it. You can't even do it downstairs. So I would be, if we come up with the size of what we want there, and then have a civil engineer look at it, that'd be fine.
But don't you need the civil engineer to tell you how big your pad could be on that piece before you know what size of buildings you can place there?
You could do it either way. We could decide on what size of building we want. Not that it was $8,500. It comes back to the needs and the wants.
Right, but you could decide what size of building you want to put there, but then you'd still have to have it civil tell you if it'll work there and how it's going to work. So
Yes.
I would think the civil part would be first.
Okay, but you have to tell them what size of, a building somewhere in there, and we have to decide on the kind of money we
I have
want.
a question.
Gary Glassing with CTA. So from an engineering standpoint, we would mark out on the drawings, we want you to survey this area. That will tell us what you can get in there. I guess telling Mike, we got to know cut fill, we got to know what our elevations are, we got to know if we need a retaining wall. Or what Commissioner Hill says, can we slope that off? We don't know that until we actually survey it. We can eyeball it, but that's not gonna tell. And I can draw, I
Excuse me
can,
a minute, excuse me a minute.
Mhm.
Okay, where did we get the $800,000 retaining wall from? Was that from you? Or was that from somebody else?
I don't think anything was ever written down. It was just, they assessed it, they looked at it, said it could
I
go
can
as high
get
as
your
800.
staff report out here and show you where you wrote it down and where you gave it to us. Where did you get the $800,000 for a retaining wall?
Commissioner, why are you asking this question? That was just thrown out. I made a comment. It has nothing to do with the discussion. We now have a number that we think it would happen, but we don't know until we do. It looks like a civil. This is the first I've heard of this, which is, I think, a great idea. But the 800 was, I threw it out because I think you guys left the site and said it could go as high as 800. That's where that came from.
Well, I mean, that's.
So
what
I don't
we had to
understand
work with.
I don't understand the relationship.
So
Sorry, I don't.
I wish you did.
We're talking about 473. We're not talking about 800.
Well, when you're asking for, that we should put in $1.5 million in a building, and you're coming up with an $800,000 retaining wall, and then you're wanting us to go look at another piece of property. So that's all I'm asking about.
Nobody ever said there was an $800,000 retaining wall.
it's,
They talked about the civil work could go as high as 800,000. That was just a comment. That's why we had them do this. So
well, to get back to the project at hand here, we need to know, we'll need to know whether we want one building or two buildings. We'll need to know the size, yes, but I think if we feel like we want this building up there, and it sounds to me like that's the most practical place to have the building, if it works, we need to have the civil engineering done on it to see what we can do, what size of buildings we can work with, and we can move them around if we know how big a pad we've got to work with. That's the first thing we need to do.
I agree with that.
So could I get a motion for that?
I'll make a motion. I would make a motion that we direct the county manager to engage, was it far, it doesn't matter who it is, I guess, an engineering firm to do this civil engineering planning. What would be a better word for that?
yes, that's good.
Yeah.
Survey.
Survey, to see if the Quonset hut area is feasible for a shop and what we can do with that area, I guess. Before we vote on that, though, I just have one question for either Mike. The civil work, I mean, that's going to be our next step anyway. That would be the smart thing for the county to do is moving forward. I mean, normally if you're doing it for your own or you're doing it for your own commercial property, maybe sometimes that's not always required, but do we have any legal standpoint, to have that civil work done? I mean, I know it's the smart thing to do in the next step in construction, but is there any legal that you know of that we have to have that done to that degree, I guess?
Mike Shepard. I believe under NRS 338, which governs public works,
Yeah.
that an owner can perform aspects of their work. It really falls on the side of, as you mentioned before, kind of what's in their wheelhouse and they have the capacity for.
Yeah.
But I mean, the real starting point where you're going with your motion is to do a site plan. You're bordered on 3 sides. You're constrained.
Yeah.
When they get done with that, they're going to tell you what a practical pad is.
Yeah.
Based on the pad you have, you can start talking about a building.
Yeah.
If you have a pad.
And I guess the reason I'm going there, Commissioner Hill, again, you had mentioned that that's a horrible site to build on, but those are the cards that were dealt. That's the property that we have. And, I agree with Commissioner Haas. The Maverick property would be a great location. It's flat. There's already 3-phase power there. I mean, but it does take it off the tax rolls, and that potentially could be another huge revenue for the county. So this is the property that we have. And with that, I make my motion that we get the civil work done and decide if this is a feasible place for us to build a building.
Just, Mr. Chair, question or comment, Mike McDonald for the record, question or comment concerning the motion. If this, I agree with giving the county manager direction. However, if the, this work or proposed work with civil engineers outside of any existing agreement that we currently have with a civil engineer, this would have to come back to the board for authorization. So I wanted to at least eliminate or pose that question if you're thinking about, is this going to be the final action to hire a firm? This will not.
Okay.
That will have to come back before the board at another agenda.
So with that, we already have contracts in place with certain companies, and that would be acceptable to direct that motion to direct.
If it's within an existing contract, it may be outside the scope of an existing contract, and we'd have to bring it back before the board at a future meeting, and that's not a problem.
Yeah, either way, and I'm sorry for not being clear, it would have to come back before the board. Whether it was just a task order within the master agreement already, or if we need to add on to that as a separate item. But I would prefer to bring it back before the board so you know exactly what you're looking at for costs.
So Commissioner Hill, would you care to pull your motion?
I'll pull it. Yeah, I would pull that motion, and
And then
I would.
We can instruct the county manager to put that on our next agenda item.
Yes, I think
Mr.
that's what,
Chair?
do we even need a mo? Go ahead. Sorry.
I went up there and I looked at the ground because it was up there. That's a place where we could build on. How much more ground we got up there, Dave? I mean, we have acres of ground up there that we could build on. And you know, if you get to thinking about it, I mean, it's going to cost us to go up there and put a pad down and put electricity in, put all the rest of it in. But we're not going out there and spending, you know, $300,000 to $500,000 for a piece of property. And that we still got to do the same thing on. I mean, we got to put pad on it. We got to put the building on it. We got to put the asphalt around it or gravel around it, however we're going to do it. Don't, you know, I'm not saying that we have to have that building right there in that little alcove. But you heard from Commissioner Cherry, you know, in saying, well, we have land, let's utilize our own land if we could do it. So please don't just limit it to that one little area.
Right, and we can relook at that, but I think Don's on. I am pretty sure that the shop yard that's there, that is the perimeter of our land up there. The land next to it is BLM, because when I first came to Humboldt County, we looked at acquiring, or there was some talk with previous commissions about acquiring that land that's, I guess, north and west of our current shop. And that is BLM land that we would have to go through that RP&P process to do. We don't have it now, but Don's on. I don't know, Don, am I accurate with it? I may not be, but I'm pretty sure that's what my recollection is.
So can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so yeah, north of our fence line for our shop is BLM. However, we also go a significant ways west, but you've got the animal or the pound up there, but there's also a lot or an area that the city uses up in that, I guess it would be the northwest corner of that property that they just use for storage, and it's near our impound yard as well. But that might be another location. I mean, just to look at, to utilize if the section for the Quonset huts is not big enough. You know, we might have to do some grading to relocate some of the city stuff, and we'd have to obviously get agreement from the city to do something like that. But there's, I mean, that's a big chunk of property up there.
Yeah. The only question I have is we still have the slope issue, I think, because we're going up the mountain, but I don't know. But yeah, if it's available, let's look at it.
And utilities, power, gotta get all that up.
Sure.
Costs money.
So can we look at some of that and have that for our next agenda? Okay. Any other comments, Commissioner Cherry?
No, have none.
All right, thank you. Any other comments, Commissioner Hill,
I don't have any.
Commissioner Haas?
No, I don't have any more. Thank you.
I don't have any more either. So do we have anything more that you want to,
Just public comment.
public comment? Any more comment? No? How about online? Any public comment out there? Hearing no more public comment, this meeting's adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everybody. Appreciate it.
If we'd approved that courthouse, we'd have some comments.
Yeah.